Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Subscription Scale. I'm your host, Nick Frederick. With me today is Ben Katz, who is the founder and CEO of HappyHead. Ben, welcome to our show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Nick.
Excited to have you on and learn more about your business today. But for those that don't know, let's start at the beginning here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of your background and how you came to start HappyHead.
Yeah, sure. I'm from a small town in Wisconsin. I was lucky enough to go to University of Pennsylvania, where I was able to study both nursing, which gave me a specialty in healthcare, as well as finance at the Wharton School. I was further lucky to get into a special program where you go straight into the MBA program from your undergrad program. So I graduated around age 22 with an MBA, a nursing degree, and an undergraduate degree in economics specialized in finance at the Wharton School and at University of Pennsylvania, which set me up really well. I worked on Wall Street for about 2 years after college and after business school, both briefly at Citibank during a couple summer internships, and then full-time at Deutsche Bank doing leverage finance for financial sponsors and for other kind of large debt issuers. I kind of didn't love that. And so I moved to Los Angeles. I joined the mailroom program at Creative Artists Agency, pushed a mail cart, served as an assistant in Hollywood, experienced a lot of the things you may have seen happen to assistants in Hollywood on Entourage or in some other context. And
I'm sure there's a whole episode's worth of stories right there.
Yeah, it's not subscription related, but it's definitely true. And then I had the opportunity to actually produce 2 movies. So when I was about 25, 26, I produced 2 movies. One's still available on Netflix. It's called Johnny Was. I still get revenue through Netflix on subscription revenues. So I guess I enjoy the benefits of that, as well as on Spotify when you listen to music from our soundtrack. So subscriptions play a role in my life since then. Didn't ever think that it would be internationally distributed and that someone in Australia or Nigeria was going to like press a play button on some sort of software and somehow millions of pennies would pop into my coffers. But it's worked out that way pretty well. And then I realized a friend of mine produced the movie Napoleon Dynamite, and he did not make enough money on that movie for me to think that Hollywood would be a long-term career for me. I think Napoleon Dynamite is kind of seen as like the Google of that industry, right? They put in $1 and the movie made hundreds of millions of dollars. And somehow he didn't make tens of millions of dollars even. And not that that's anything to sneeze at. He made an amazing movie that we all know and love. But I realized that that is not the right kind of business for me to help support a family and to live the life I want to live with stability and such. To be in Hollywood and successful, I think you either really need to want to bleed for your art, or you could be an heir and not need to worry about financing your life, or maybe you just want to be around celebrities. Those are kind of the 3 buckets that would make you a good fit for Hollywood. And I had a blast, still one of the most fun, if not the most fun job I ever had. Then I went on to start a e-commerce business. We started by laser engraving the back of iPods with famous brands. So it taught me about how to license brands from Hello Kitty to college logos to superhero logos and so on in exchange for a percentage royalty. We were able to effectively differentiate the iPod such that a $200 iPod might sell for $260. So we had a little bit more margin than the typical iPod seller. I ended up selling that business to a venture-backed startup called Zazzle. Zazzle is a large t-shirt printer, and they were appreciative of the fact that we had the skills to do this on the back of electronics, and we very quickly moved into phone cases, which were new back then, if you can imagine. And then I got a chance to enter the payments business. I worked briefly for about a year and change, an affiliate of Walmart Financial Services called Green Dot. It was a recently public company here in Los Angeles. They make the Walmart Money Card. They also do the Visa card that sits on the rack at most major retailers. And that taught me a lot about payments. And from that, I started my first subscription business, which was an online branchless banking service called card.com. And so card.com is effectively a branchless bank and very similar to my phone case business. In fact, very close to identical to my phone case business. We made it so you could get, for example, your favorite football player on your Visa card, or other brands that would lead you to trust. And remember, this was founded about a year after Occupy Wall Street. So trust in banks was low, anger at banks was high. And just now you had the technology to take a picture of a check, which would allow you to beam it to the cloud, which would allow us to do effectively fraud underwriting on that check. And then at the same time, just then you had a phone in your pocket that could find you a pin on a map, which would be where an ATM would be located that was free and in network. So all of a sudden you didn't need branches. And at the technology had made it so you could deposit a check. And at the same time, people didn't, for the most part, didn't like banks. And so we were able to make a more fair, more technologically enabled bank that had garnered the trust of all these brands I had worked with. So I had a great run with that company. It was venture backed. I ran that company for 5 years. About 5 years in, we hired a CEO that was an industry veteran to be the CEO. And I'm happy to report that company sold last year. Since the time I was CEO, I went through a brief period where I was a marketing consultant on an interim basis for a couple companies, including subscription food company Hungry Root, to be a multi-$100 million healthy meals delivery company, much more successful than kind of earlier branded names like Blue Apron and some of these others. Amazing team there. I also had the fortune of being an interim kind of marketing lead at a company called Nom Nom, which was then called Nom Nom Now, which was premium fresh dog food delivered weekly or monthly. And I worked with a few other subscription businesses. What I knew always was, subscription is such an amazing business because you start with a lot of predictability in terms of your lifetime value and in terms of you develop really deep relationships with your customers as long as you continue to provide real value. And so you have an opportunity and a platform from which you can start cross-selling and upselling other products. And you can also potentially get favorable financing off of the expected lifetime value of those cohorts. As I'm sure your audience already is familiar with that term. Maybe the most formative part of kind of that whole background that I just shared. In my earlier career, I was really lucky to take an investment from a venture fund into card.com. That company was called QED Investors. And QED is led by and backed primarily by the founder of Capital One. And Capital One, being a credit card company, has a lot of experience with financial modeling, retention curves, risk, as well as kind of very high velocity testing through use of statistics, of creative, of marketing message, of channel, and of other predictive factors in terms of how you can determine, in advance potentially how much the next customer you acquire is likely to be worth. So that was really formative in my understanding of how subscriptions can work, how to evaluate the value of your customer base, and effectively how to optimize LTV to CAC and marketing together with customer communications to drive yield for everyone, as well as to drive great customer experience. So that's my background. About 2.5 years ago, I was introduced to two doctors who during COVID had founded a high-end, best-in-class company relating to hair loss. Dermatologists prescribed hair medicine. And the company at the time was called High Happy Head. And now the company is called Happy Head, which is at happyhead.com. And these doctors had built the beginning of what now I lead today as the CEO. And I'd be happy to talk more about that. Back to you.
Well, it's interesting that this is the company that kind of took you back to your education, right? Your nursing degree. Was that a big factor in why this your latest venture here was exciting, is to kind of get back to that and kind of use part of what you had learned kind of back in college?
Yeah, it was that, and being real, COVID tipped the entire balance on telemedicine. If it's hard to think back 4 years, right? But if you think about 4 years ago, barely any of us used an experience like this through Zoom or Google Hangouts for medicine. I personally think I had never had a telemedicine experience myself before COVID. And then during COVID, whether it was going to your therapist or going to your doctor of any type, trying to get a prescription, even going to your orthopedic surgeon, for God's sake, in the middle of COVID, was done through Zoom. And so it wasn't lost on me how tectonic of a shift that was, how large the opportunity would be from it. And when I got to know the doctors and realized the opportunity in this space, especially the timing was the perfect timing, I was really compelled, similar to the way online banking was the right thing to disrupt circa 2012, when you had the phone in your pocket, could find those ATMs that could take a picture of a check. This too was very much a tectonic shift for the healthcare industry in general.
It's interesting, and we still call it telehealth, right? Because there was a time when it was over the phone, right before there was Zoom and things like that. But even from a payments perspective, it's interesting how those businesses were categorized as high risk, and it's probably because there was a time when that was used for less than, up and up purposes, right? But to your point, now we've had COVID. That was out of necessity that we started providing legitimate healthcare online. So it's kind of gone through a shift, right? Is that kind of why this makes sense now?
Yeah, you've clearly been doing internet marketing or at least checking your email for the last 20 years. So yeah, I mean, anyone who's over 35, I would say, probably remembers that they used to get emails for Viagra from Canadian pharmacies. And that's exactly right. Both prescription medicines that were from unsavory vendors in the early days of the internet, and even today in the supplement space, there's a lot of people making pretty questionable claims. And that does put the category inappropriately at this point in high risk.
What have been then some of the challenges as you've tried to stand up this new business? Now, and again, COVID certainly changed things and it made things more acceptable, but you still have to have technology challenges. You've got founders that are along with you that are doctors, but finding that staff. What are some of the challenges as you've started to scale this business up?
Yeah, it's a great point. At the end of the day, the technology challenges are substantial. This is not like you can't just use a Shopify store for this because of HIPAA compliance. And so what it means is even an experience that hopefully feels like Shopify is unfortunately custom built, meaning from soup to nuts. You're not using, the standard off the shelf products. You're custom building things that frankly have been built hundreds of times before by other developers, even teams of developers, because of the fact that you're innovating in a space that's brand new and has a high compliance and information security preference. So I'd say building out what should just feel like an e-commerce experience and should seem like a simple thing that, really anyone wanting to sell stuff in a box can handle. It's much more than that, even though I hope our customers don't feel that.
It's interesting you say that. And I think a lot of consumers, and I'll put myself in this category too, have gone to our doctor, even live, and been frustrated with the technology, right? The whole experience, I feel like I'm putting in the same information over and over again, but all of those compliance and regulatory related things kind of sit in the background and aren't necessarily all that exposed to the end consumer. But to your point, even though this has all been done before, you kind of have to go down this path again because of some compliance things that aren't really adding to the consumer experience. They're required, they're necessary, but their expectations of going to Amazon.com or wherever, they're carrying that over into their health experience and expecting it to be the same, right?
Yeah, you've got really good insights on this. I'll give you just one really little tidbit. The system that was sending prescriptions was never intended to send orders. All it's saying is this doctor says that Nick is approved for this medicine this many times. Now, let's say that Nick was approved for 12 times. Does the pharmacy, when they get that order, do they ship it once with 12 in it? Do they ship it 4 times with 3 in it? Do they ship it 12 times 1 month at a piece? What day should they ship it on? Should they ship it on day 28? No, you'd be out before the weekend was over. So how do you handle even little logistical questions like that are substantial?
Kind of devil's in the details when it comes down to that stuff. But again, consumers expect it to just work, right? They've been accustomed to those experiences on other platforms. And so you've had to, as you said, make quite a bit of investments in the technology, but any other innovations or I would say technological challenges as you guys have gone to delivering this product online?
I think the other thing is figuring out how to make the doctor's visit very efficient and partnering with great partners who can do the same. So as an example, let's say that you're a healthy patient who's the most typical person applying. You're a 45-year-old male, you have no health issues, you're currently taking no medicines, you've never had any side effects from any medicines you've taken in the past. You have a picture of your hairline and a picture of your driver's license put into the sign-up funnel. In that scenario, it's very easy for the doctor to say yes. But let's say that you're a cancer patient. Let's say that you've had side effects from other medicines in the past, or even the same medicines that we're prescribing. Now we want the doctor to spend a lot of time with you, right? So it's kind of like a concept of triage, as we would know from the emergency room, from back when I was in nursing school. We want to make sure that the easy cases get handled very efficiently so that time and love and care can be given to the more complex cases. And so thinking about how to prioritize the way you communicate on with the doctors so that the doctors can allocate their time most efficiently and effectively to the hard cases.
Yeah. Is that where the technology really enables that, right? Because you can take a consumer through a questionnaire what are you allergic to, what medicines you're taking, how old are you, all of those things, so that the doctor is presented with all of that and can make the quick decision if there is a quick one to be made. And to your point, spend more time with somebody who maybe has some underlying conditions or other things to consider.
That's right. We even have state-by-state regulatory changes. There's a roughly 35 states that are fine with an asynchronous relationship, meaning a patient uploads a bunch of answers to a question. Then there's additional states that need the patient to be on the phone with the doctor at some point during the care to establish a doctor-patient relationship. And so even things like that can be different state by state, the same way like any e-commerce person would know that state taxes are different depending on their nexus. And, they'll have to set different state taxes depending on where their warehouses is. So people are used to in this business and subscription business to some different customizability for state. But in our industry, it's pretty substantial because while there are overarching FDAs and CDCs, the real regulators at the end of the day are the regulators of the doctors and the regulators of the pharmacies, which are, for the most part, the state agencies of those.
Well, so you've got an extensive marketing background. What is working for you guys in terms of finding new consumers, new clients? Because I got to believe a lot of people think I go to my doctor, right? For anything health related, they're going to refer me or be able to serve me. But you guys are really taking somebody directly online. So how are you educating the market that there's an alternative?
Yeah, if I'm going to be honest, we really rely on our better financed, generic competitors. So we sell at the high end of the market. We sell custom compounded 3-in-1 capsules and 5-in-1 topicals that are prescribed by dermatologists. We also have the ability to customize all of those. So we're putting multiple pharmaceutical APIs, active ingredients, effectively in each product, and it can even be customized. So it could be 4.5 products, it could be 4 products, it could be 3.5 products, and so on, for a lot of benefits that we can get to later, maybe. And again, it's dermatologist prescribed. And the reason we, Happy Head, use dermatologists is, do you know how many minutes nurses spend in nursing school to learn about hair?
Very little.
If you guess 0, that's the right answer.
Okay.
And then think about doctors. Doctors are only in med school for 4 years. How many minutes do you think the average doctor spends learning about hair?
Yeah, it's got to be minimal.
It pretty much rounds to 0. Whereas if you go to dermatology school, you actually spend 6 extra years of your career learning about hair and skin. So you've already got the 4 years. Now, this is exactly like it should be. I'm not denigrating doctors. My dad's a surgeon. He doesn't know anything about hair. You go to school for 4 years. Now, what do we want doctors knowing about, and nurses? We want them knowing about ABC: airway, breathing, circulation. So airway, what to do when you're choking; breathing, what to do when your lungs are filled with water or you've got a punctured lung; circulation, what do you do when you have a thrombosis, a clot, a heart attack, an aneurysm; and then also renal failure, liver failure, broken bones. These are where we want doctors during their 4 years of med school. And that's like, you've got 302 bones, you've got many more cells. Like, that's where doctors should be spending their time. But a specialist is the person who spends 6 extra years of their career getting deep into one thing. And in our case, dermatologists, it's hair and skin. Our competitors, we have 3 very large competitors. We're probably number 4 in the market in terms of telemedicine, but we're number 1 in the kind of high-end, high information part of the market. So Hims, Keeps, which is part of a conglomerate called 30 Medicine, and Roman are the 3 biggest companies that we compete with. Each of them has raised between $600 million and several $1 billion in the case of Roman. We're privately financed and 80% owned by doctors and nurses, which we're really proud of. And those companies have made the decision strategically to be across all categories, right? Migraines, erectile dysfunction, mental health, premature ejaculation, testosterone. All we do is hair. And because they're across all these categories, they have general care practitioners, or really they have whoever is the most efficient from a price perspective, the cheapest, let's say, person who can write a prescription in your state. And so if it's a nurse that's able to write a prescription in your state, just because that's the way the state licenses work, then they'll have a nurse. If it's a doctor, they'll have a doctor. It could be an ER doctor, it could be any random doctor that's not a dermatologist necessarily. So we've made the decision, and where we fit in and where we're special is we only use dermatologists. And what that allows us to do is to offer these more complicated to prescribe, because you need a lot of know-how, how to titrate time with the patients. And so that's where we really stand out at Happy Head. And so Happy Head is dermatologist prescribed hair medicine.
So is that kind of your lead messaging? Because I think a lot of consumers probably assume this is largely the same. I can go to any one of these sites and probably get pretty much the same thing. How do they know that there might be something better?
Yeah, to get back to your original question, which I don't think I actually finished the thought, but you remind me now what it was, is basically those companies are airdropping tens and tens of millions of dollars of media, educating there is hair medicine available online, there's other medicine available online. We benefit from that media spend. Now, someone then goes to Google, they type in, I want hair medicine. They say, hey, these things are available at 30, 40 bucks, but there's this other thing that's like $79. I wonder why it's 30 or 40 bucks more. And then they come to our site and they see the fact that we have multiple ingredients rather than just one. They see the fact that we use hair specialists rather than kind of general care practitioners. And for some people, they want that premium experience and they want that premium product. Maybe the example is Honda's a perfectly good car. Hondas are great, in fact, right? They get you where you're going. But if you have a Porsche, it's more fun. And also, if you had a Porsche, you wouldn't take it to just any car mechanic. You would take it to a European car specialist or even to a Porsche mechanic. And so a lot of people, especially on the coasts, but across America, are starting to treat their bodies like their temples. They're realizing clean eating is worth it. They're working on their bodies. They're trying to have a healthier life so they have a healthier, longer life. And part of that is going to the best-in-class doctor and the best-in-class specialist for different parts of your health. And that's where Happy Head fits in.
That's great. I think, for a lot of people, and I being one of them, there's frustration with the kind of the healthcare system in America in general, but like with going to a doctor and not knowing, what do they specialize in, if they specialize in anything at all, and then they're kind of giving you generic answers. And oh, by the way, I might go to a different doctor and get a totally different answer. So that idea of specialized medicine, especially something I can easily access, it's got to be pretty attractive, but the consumers have to find it and even know it's there, right?
That's right. And you know what? Before COVID, our competitors can be forgiven for being all things to all people. Hims even has a hers division. Rome even has a Rory division. Okay. So all these, so effectively they're CVS 2.0 and for men, and then we're also CVS 2.0 for women, which is still a huge innovation. You didn't have to go to your doctor before you went to CVS. So and then it came to you. You didn't have to go. So just to be clear, our predecessor competitors, Hims and Roman, are amazing. And they can be forgiven for trying to be all things for all people. You've got to remember that the telemedicine market today is something like 20 or 50 times larger than it was before COVID. So if you were going up to Sand Hill Road and you were trying to say, hey, I'm raising financing for my business, and they said, so you're going to start a business in one category? Like, why wouldn't you do everything? The whole market is only whatever. And that was the right answer at that time. We are lucky in that we were formed at the first couple months when you could have been like, wow, the telemedicine market is wide open now. It can be as big as a fifth of all medicine, a third of all medicine, half of all medicine at some point in the future. And therefore, of course, dermatologists are going to be experts in dermatology. And so we were really at the forefront at the perfectly right time.
Turning to the kind of the subscription side of things, this makes a lot of sense, right? Because the medicines I think that we're talking about here are long-term, right? This isn't treat a specific thing, it's solved, move on. Is that where you guys are going to stay focused, is those types of products that are kind of long-term treatment?
Yeah, in fact, Happy Head will never, ever do anything outside of hair. We have no interest in being a everything to all people company. We think we can build a enduring company, a worthy company, a incredibly scaled company at the highest degree just by being experts in hair.
The name does box it a little bit, but that's probably in a good way, right? Because, there is that, okay, that's just what they're called. This is probably what they specialize in. How then do you grow this business, right? You talk about some competitors who are getting ridiculous amounts of investment, right? So they probably do have to get in some of these other areas to justify, that and to get a return for those investors. But where do you guys go from here?
Yeah, for us, it's just, I guess the first thing I'd say is it's all about retaining customers. So if you have a great relationship with someone who can afford your product, and if you get them their hair back, or if you halt their hair loss, they're really appreciative. And they don't want to take the risk of, if we continue to treat them well through good customer service, prompt operations, kind, empathetic service, then they don't want to leave for some other offering. So Happy Head is really, like the name of the company implies, like we're just trying to make you happy. We're trying to make you have confidence with your hair, with your head. And hopefully that also makes you calmer inside your head, because hair loss is not just a physical issue, it's also a psychological issue, especially for people who started having hair loss in their teens or 20s before their friends were. It's something that people have a chip on their shoulder for the long haul about. And there's a lot of people who feel like the reason they didn't get the job, the reason they didn't get the deal, the reason they didn't get the girl, the reason they didn't get the guy was because of the guy was looking at their forehead, the girl was looking at their forehead. They didn't feel confident in the room. And so we really try to give people their confidence back. And so at the end of the day, getting delivery right, consistent and high quality product, having doctors there who are best in class so that they can take them through the patient journey, not just today, but through life. A simple example would be maybe part of the year or 1 year you're living in Miami. Maybe the next year you're living in Aspen. Aspen's a lot drier. You're probably skiing a lot. You're going to have different skin issues, which are going to interact with your hair differently. And so when you move to Aspen, you may want the aloe in your hair in our product. When you move to Miami, you may not want the aloe in our product, as just a simple example. So continuing to enable users to request different types of customization is one of the main things that we want to do with Happy Head. The first time we kind of thought about, product expansion, there's a very successful company in our industry that sells hair vitamins and hair supplements called Nutrafol. Nutrafol is an amazing company. They don't sell hair growth medicine. They can't make FDA claims, but they do sell a really high quality supplement that does make your hair thicker. And we basically have a very similar high quality vitamin supplement that we sell as well. So our first thought was, in addition to hair medicine, what if we also gave people the chance to have a supplement? It's easier in some ways because it is just an e-commerce purchase. Now you don't need to go through the doctor's, visit. Maybe in some future date, this is sitting on the shelf in a beautiful bottle at Sephora or at Neiman Marcus, as an example. Then we thought, okay, well, what else is kind of things that touch people's hair? And so there's hair thickening solutions, such as shampoo and conditioner. So we now sell hair thickening shampoo and hair thickening conditioner. And so that's pretty much the direction of kind of innovation of the company. What else can we do for people around hair that's medical in nature? Most of the time, it's going to be prescription medical in nature.
Staying on the topic of retention, though, you talk about a great consumer experience, and that's always got to be first and foremost, right, to keeping your members. But what are some other things you guys are doing? Because it's not always related directly to the product, the customer experience. You can have payment issues, you can have moving, or a whole host of different things. So
yeah,
it costs a lot to acquire customers. How are you guys, other ways that you guys are keeping them?
Yeah. So I think the first one that I'd say is setting expectations. So hair loss medicine, or hair growth medicine, as we prefer to call it, isn't instant. You don't put it on and all of a sudden you're a chia pet. Okay. It takes 3 to 6 months to have a result. So in the box, when you get it, we let people know that this is a 3 to 6 month journey. Like, stick with it. That's easy to say as someone selling something, but we need to be honest up front about the expectations, right? We're not snake oil salesmen. We're selling FDA approved APIs. We also sell FDA approved medicine among our offerings. And so we want to make sure that people are expecting that this is going to be a 3 to 6 month starting point, and it's going to get even better from there. So I think setting expectations is the first thing, especially in an era of Amazon. Everyone expects the thing, with like the next day. If your subscription company can't get something to someone the next day, you should let them know ahead of time, or else you're already starting behind the expectation of the consumer, and it's just not setting you up for high net promoter scores, happy customers, high retention. And then I think the next thing is logistics. It's like getting it to people when they need it. This is an area that not recently, but within the last year, we've fallen down on a little bit. We grew so fast that we, had some technological outages, and maybe some medicine got to someone a week later than it was supposed to. And the people who are consistent with it, like saying, hey, my hair is not benefiting, and like owning it very quickly, sending a customer the second you make a mistake, apologizing up front, and then setting expectations of when you're going to correct this. People are willing to give you some amount of leeway to the extent you communicate up front when you fall down, because they appreciate the transparency. So I think that's another thing. During the cancellation process, it's a great tool to have a survey of why the cancellation is happening. Is this switching to a customer, to a competitor? Is this someone just, decided that they don't want to do this at all? So trying to get some information about why a cancel is happening is incredibly valuable in terms of building your product in a way that allows for better retention with the next opportunity. And then you could go to win back. How do you win a customer back? One time I tried to cancel Hulu, and when I went to cancel Hulu, it said, whoa, like, what if we gave you 1 month free? And I, for a zero marginal cost product, or approximately a zero marginal cost product, I'm sure they have content costs and content contracts with their vendors and their partners. But effectively, think about what you can do to try to get someone to not cancel, to like, hey, give us one more try. Like, we really think we can develop a relationship here. On our mind is, we believe that a lot of the people who do cancel because we're just out of their price range. They're a used car driver, and Porsches are not within their kind of reasonable affordability, and that's fine. Like, we want to support everyone, and so we do sell the same commercially available generic medicine that Hims or Roman sells, and we even sell it at the same price. I think we might even be a few bucks cheaper. I haven't tracked that recently because it's not a big portion of our sales, but we do have that. And so kind of where we are is like, hey, we noticed you cancel. Would you like to stay with us, with better specialization of doctors, with dermatologists kind of guiding your path, instead of switching to our competitors and trying to have what I would call a downsell product, in addition to those cross-sell products that I mentioned, like shampoo and conditioner and supplements.
So taking a step back from Happy Head for a second, you're a serial entrepreneur. You've done this a couple of times. You have some experience before then. When you're evaluating, thinking through what the next opportunity is, like what's the next market you want to go after, what are kind of some of those key criteria? And what do you think maybe some listeners right now that are looking at starting a subscription business, what should they be paying attention to?
Yeah, thanks a lot for asking. I'm a big fan of entrepreneurship, is the first thing. I have a very personal relationship with entrepreneurship, just like anyone who does it does. And I have strong views. And just to be clear, my views are not the only way to do anything. So if you have a different path and you want to do your entrepreneurial activities, you should. I'm a huge fan of mitigating risk. I am a huge fan of testing along the lines of the lean startup methodology. This can mean a couple things. I think the first thing I'd say is, don't quit your day job. Have consistent income while you craft an idea. When you craft an idea using lean startup methodology, and for anyone who hasn't read Eric Ries's book, Lean Startup, can't recommend it enough. I think it's the most important manual in terms of how to start up a company. Some of it's better known and more disseminated in the culture now because the book has been so impactful on people like me and others that some of it may actually seem, oh yeah, of course, at this point, but still it's worth a read. And the way to think about the lean startup methodology is, what could I put up as a test on the open internet to see if there's a there, to see if there's anyone who'd be interested? So I'll give you an example. When I started an online bank, I'm not a billionaire. I couldn't start a bank on my own. And so I said, okay, well, how could I convince someone who knew about banking that I had a good idea? And I knew from my phone case business that when you put Bart Simpson on a phone case and you show it to fans of Bart Simpson on Facebook, that they click on it. And so I said, okay, well, how would I do a test for a Visa card with Bart Simpson on it? And I said, okay, I would create a website, and we called it Upsilon Card. And then later we called it Card Like, the card you like based on your Facebook likes. So we had cardlike.com/Hello Kitty, cardlike.com/LA Dodgers, cardlike.com/Delta. And we came up with about 10 brands that we thought would be interesting to test: Pugs, Hello Kitty, and so on, US Army logo. And we effectively made a fake landing page for a sign-up form for a banking product. And then, in a not compliant way, I'll fully acknowledge, and I realize we're on video, but this is well over a decade ago. We also put a Wells Fargo and a Bank of America logo on it. And Wells Fargo and Bank of America, I haven't checked their net promoter scores lately, but they're not very favorable. They were very not favorable circa Occupy Wall Street, and rightly so. Let me say that further. And so what I was able to prove with nothing but a $100 WordPress website was that people were willing to give me their phone number, their name, their email address, and their date of birth at, I don't remember the exact numbers, but let's say 95% cheaper when I showed a fan of Hello Kitty a Hello Kitty Visa card, or a fan of Bart Simpson a Bart Simpson Visa card, versus when I would send the same audience, a fan of Hello Kitty, a Bank of America or a Wells Fargo card. And so I took this data. Let's say that if I remember right, cost of acquiring a Hello Kitty email address was, let's say, $10. Cost of acquiring from the same audience of people who like Hello Kitty a Bank of America Visa card was $200. So I had a 20x advantage, or a 95% reduction in cost of acquiring a customer. And I took that data and I reached out to a couple people who were very early in the fintech investing space. And among them was a guy named Frank Rotman, who was the right-hand man to a guy named Nigel Morris at a company called QED Investors, or QED Ventures. And Frank had run an important division or two for Nigel at Capital One, and Nigel was the co-founder of Capital One. And those people were really great at data. they practiced or developed a strategy for growth that's similar in some ways to lean startup called information-based strategy. You can look it up. I could actually give you a link to some documents I've written about information-based strategy for posting with your podcast.
Sure, that'd be great.
And information-based strategy is basically testing and learning at all points of the customer journey. Where are you placing your ads? What time of day are you placing your ads? What is the image and the text that is in your ad? When someone clicks, what website are you landing them on? What do they do from that point on? Do they sign up? Do they sign up when you send them an email later? And so on. Even things like, oh, I noticed that people seem to like this product who are on Android phones more than people who are on iOS phones. Things like that can give me just like little tells about like whether you have product market fit within a niche. Because to build a nice company, you don't need to be right for everyone. You need to be right for several thousand people, maybe several million people. And there's 330 million Americans. So, you don't need to be all things to all people. And in fact, probably not the right move for most people. And so I had this bank test, which was really impactful enough that I was able to convince that company to give me a couple $1 million to start an actual online banking service. And then with their credibility, I was able to go out to non-fintech VCs and say, hey, I've got one of the most credible fintech VCs behind this thing. Do you want to also put in money? And we were able to raise, I think it was $7 or $8 million. And I was something like 25, 26, 26, 27 at the time. And that was the beginning of kind of my venture backed entrepreneurial endeavors. I had an amazing experience building that and building out a team that was able to really monitor subscription economics, create win-back flows, create great customer communications to kind of drive customers to take the actions that you need them to take so that you can prove to them that your product is great for them.
Well, you said it a couple of times, but a lot of that was during the Occupy Wall Street movement, right? So there was this distrust in banks. And it's interesting still, though, that you were able to collect personal information on the pages that weren't bank related, more so then. But, consistently statistics have said people feel like banks are the most secure or should be the most secure with personal data. But that's not what you saw during that time. That's fascinating.
Yeah. And no one doesn't trust, for example, everyone trusts Dolly Parton. Everyone trusts Hello Kitty, right? There's certain brands that just are nothing but goodness. They've never done anything wrong for you. And because great brands, Disney brands, Warner Brothers brands, NFL brands care a lot about their brands, they don't let some really dangerous product. They don't let you buy a mug, wholesale mug from China that has lead in it. You know that when you see a Green Bay Packers logo on a mug, that someone, unless you're buying it on the street somewhere, that someone has put some thought into like, what's actually this mug's, provenance. But, to get back to your original question, how to start a startup. So there's this lean methodology. I created like the concept of a multi-decamillion, maybe multi-$100 million bank, and I did it for a couple $100. And then I spent a few $1,000s running, literally like less than $10,000, running marketing tests on those landing pages. And then I took that book report and said, look how cool I am. Look at this research report I did. And I need your help actually building this so it's not just theory. And then I convinced someone to let me do that. And then another part of, what's the right startup? At that point, it was the right startup because of the zeitgeist and the angst around Occupy Wall Street and AIG and Lehman Brothers and all of that, overdraft fees, everything around it, student loans, all of this. And then on the flip side, there was this new technology that I've already spoken to. Take a picture of a check, find an ATM in the back of a bodega, right? That you don't need a giant Wells Fargo logo or a Chase logo to say that's a Chase anymore. And so in fact, at this point, the banks would love to get rid of their branches for the most part. Like they want one across the street from, wealthy people's house, but like they don't want their branches because it's very high overhead. And so the point I was trying to make is that it's also about like what's happening right now that's changing everything. So for sure right now, AI is changing everything. For sure right now, telemedicine is changing massively because of the changes that COVID kind of led to in terms of different regulatory changes, different kind of trained 100% of us more or less on what this is. Maybe it trained 90% of us 5 times in terms of like, let's do telemedicine or medicine in this sort of format that you and I are experiencing right now, which is just a conversation at the end of the day, which is what it always was, aside from when a doctor needs to peer into your ear using some sort of microscope. Well, so like what's happening right now, either culturally in the zeitgeist or what's happening right now in technology to unlock something?
Well, when you're evaluating what's happening externally and where there might be opportunities, how do you take that though from, okay, there could be something here to, I can make a business out of this?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there could be is me just reading all the time. I consume so much information, whether it's listening to podcasts like yours and many others, reading the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Economist all the time. And my LinkedIn profile says lifelong student. That is what I am. I genuinely just am curious, and I just want to always consume information, sometimes to my detriment, where I probably could be more productive if I just, time box this to 30 minutes a day. I wouldn't be as happy. To kind of talk to your, second question, how do you know if it's a business? I mean, that kind of lean startup methodology where you kind of first get your first wedge, figure out what amount you can lose and make sure it's not a lot, an amount that's going to cost you, homelessness or cost your kids their dental plan, right? Like, but what can you invest to just get some sort of a feedback? Is there blood in the water? And then from there, you'll gain confidence. You'll get to be able to convince other people, whether it's a critical engineer you need or a critical marketing partner you need, or some other like B2B client that you need, saying, hey, can I get this? Test clients, or having people that will be your first customer, B2B customers in SaaS. If you can't convince someone like, hey, if I were to build this thing that I'm saying, would you commit to being the first person on it? And if they are not willing to sign a contract saying, yeah, we would pay you $1,000 a month if you built this thing, then like, how do you know they're serious about it? And so finding a real need that someone's actually willing to swipe their credit card for. One thing I really would like to caution people against is the concept of stated intent. Lots of people say, I would love that product. You should totally build that. And then you spend a year of your life building it and then crickets. And revealed intent is when someone hands you their credit card and an order. And so it's really important not to believe in surveys, not to believe in focus groups. In my life, I haven't banned them, and I don't ban them from my current customers. I'm always happy to hear from my current actives, but I really don't care what some random person on the street thinks about some idea I've got. That's almost a recipe. I'm sure many people have heard about, Henry Ford would have built a faster horse sort of, quote, if he had asked people on the street what they thought out of a car. And it's absolutely true. People are just going about their lives in a busy day, but when you actually bring them something that lets them drive from Chicago to Detroit in 3 hours instead of 3 days plus a lot of oats, they're going to be big fans.
I love that distinction of stated intent, because I think it can be real easy for a lot of people, and myself included at times, when you hear somebody go, yeah, that's a fantastic idea. I'd be all over that if you built it or brought this product to market. And then you deliver some version of it, and then to your point, kind of get the silence or the crickets or just people going, yeah, I don't think so. That there's nothing more frustrating than that.
Yeah, I also, as a couple more precautionary tales, as long as we're on the precautionary tale category, I think building something around your passion is something that a lot of people will want. I really discourage people from doing it. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I'm telling you that, like, first of all, my passion is skiing and off-roading, and both of them are very small markets. And I think that the more relevant thing is, whether or not it's a small market, is it could destroy your love for the things that actually are the way you get zen when you get away from work. So seriously consider whether or not you want to conflate your fun and your work. I get fun just out of my work, right? By team building, recruiting, crafting and shaping and sculpting and mentoring and retaining my team. I get joy from seeing my own team members recruit prior team members of theirs into my companies. That's actually probably my single happiest moment inside my companies, is when I hire someone, they hire great candidates behind them that have previously worked for them. What a compliment to the person I hired. What a compliment to me that I built a company that they would want to vouch for and say, hey, you should come join me too. And so the other thing I love inside my companies, when I see things going on in the departments that are better than the idea I would have ever come up with, that's like the best thing, because you're like, wow, I have actually something running. And it's like, not only is it running, it's running better than I ever could have done by a long shot. And literally new things are happening within it. So I think that's one caution I have. And then the second caution I have is I really urge people to think about big markets. Big markets always have opportunity, or tend to have giant opportunity. And you can be even a niche part of a big market and still have a big company. Whereas if you pick a niche market, skiing, off-road racing in Baja, even smaller, these are very small markets. You can make 100% market share and you still wouldn't necessarily build a self-sustaining dozen-person business or 3 dozen-person business. I know a lot of people in the off-road racing community in Baja who love it so much, and they're making custom parts for your off-road pre-runner truck, and like, it's cool and they love their lives, but they have lots of working capital. They have very small customer audience. They're banging their head against the wall as to why they only have a $300,000 a year business and they have $270,000 costs, and they're kind of having to together as auto mechanics while they're trying to build their parts businesses. And it's because they chose a small market because they were passionate about it. And then it turns out that they, want to get out of it entirely, and they're no longer passionate about it because they're spending 80 hours thinking about just how not to go bankrupt.
And that works for some people, and if that's, the life you want to have, but go on with the right expectations, right? That you're not going to conquer the world necessarily by going after some of those niche markets and going after something that you love. And oh, by the way, and you already said it, you might destroy the thing that you love in the process.
That's the thing I'm most worried about.
Ben, this has been a fun conversation. I know we've gone far over where we typically go here, but it's been a lot of fun, and I've shared a lot of great insights. For any of the listeners who want to learn more about Happy Head, or maybe have some questions about things we talked about today, where are the best places for them to go?
Yeah, happyhead.com. And anyone who listens to this is welcome to email me, ben@happyhead.com. I'll answer the question, and appreciate anyone who made it to this point in this podcast. Nick,
Yeah,
you really do have a unique podcast in that it is specialized and it is niche, and that's why it's of value.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a heck of a lot of fun to do, but the best thing I get out of it is I get to talk to people like yourself who have been in the trenches and are sharing their stories. And, I feel a little bit smarter for, being able to talk to people like yourself. So thank you for taking the time to do it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. And thanks everyone for listening. If you want to get in touch, happyhead.com, Ben@happyhead.com.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Ben.
Thanks a lot.